Rata, the time has come to talk about the Jews. And not just any Jews, these are the worst Jews of them all. Kaijus. Take that stupid filter off, it makes you look ghastly.
I think it brings out my complexion.
It's kind of funny to think about how the track record for the teaming of TCG archetypes used to be so aggressively Western. King Arthur, Dante from the Alighieri series. What football will look like in the future. Star Wars with girls.
I applauded it for being different!
So, to say the least, it was a bit surprising to see that the next batch of cards released alongside Cosmo would be based on a concept very closely associated with Japanese tokusatsu culture, that being Kaiju. Grown-ass men in rubber suits wrestling and stomping around tiny cardboard cities representing some unfortunate prefecture, resulting in very entertaining allegories for the usual Friday on the Japanese shoreline. Another surprising aspect of this archetype was the uniquely ridiculous summoning condition on most of the monsters, which built up the archetype's infamous reputation. Going over the monsters by release date, we start off with Dogoran, the Mad Flame Kaiju, most likely the Godzilla representative given his appearance and release timing, although his name is a bit weird given that it's one letter away from referencing an obscure octopus boy from 1964. It's a level 8 fire dinosaur with 3000 attack and 1200 defense and the following effect. You can special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's field in attack position by tributing one monster they control. If your opponent controls a Kaiju monster, you can special summon this card from your hand in attack position. You can only control one Kaiju monster. Once per turn, you can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. This card cannot attack the turn this effect is activated. The first effect, which is shared among the Kaiju monsters, that being the ability to summon the monster to the opponent's side of the field by tributing one of theirs, might as well have been the only effect on every single Kaiju and we would barely notice a difference. This is by far the absolute strongest form of monster removal in the game, ignoring effect immunity and negation windows, resulting in immediate disposal of nearly any problem monster in the game, only held back by summon prevention or monsters immune to tributing, which are extremely few and far between. Kaijus weren't the first or the last to implement this concept, seeing how Santa Claus, Lava Golem and Straight Ballin' are a thing, but Kaijus have the benefit of not requiring the opponent to control more than one monster, as well as not giving the opponent immediate benefits the way Santa Claus does. I could go on and on about how Kaijus cause considerable turmoil in the environment of boss monster design, being able to out anything and everything under the sun, and if they were necessary evil or not, but that's a topic for a video essay I'm not qualified enough to produce. It's actually a lot more interesting to see how this effect correlates with the rest of the Kaiju playstyle. The idea was very clearly to emulate the giant monster face-off experience by making one Kaiju battle another, while using their own distinctive abilities in combat. However, to use these abilities, they need the so-called Kaiju counters, a resource which is usually only generated if a player is piloting a dedicated Kaiju deck, seeing how the primary method of producing these counters is their field spell, which we'll talk about in a minute. This effectively means that using Kaijus as a simple removal option without focusing on generating Kaiju counters is a genuinely better way to use the monsters than playing the archetype the way it was intended. Instead of tributing an opponent's creature to give them a Kaiju with its own benefits and downsides, you effectively just replace a problematic monster with a vanilla you can run over or pop with no effort. Overall, just outstanding card design from the TCG department. But back to Dogoran as a monster, it's a pretty decent effect given how easy it is to build up 3 Kaiju counters by employing the field spell, and he used to be ran in the occasional dinosaur build as one of the targets for Petit Pteranodon, so in a dedicated Kaiju deck, he's a perfectly fine option. Not a playmaker or anything, but I think you'll find that Kaiju monsters lack whatever could be considered a playmaker. As evidenced by their next monster, the tragically named Cmongo, the Sticky String Kaiju. He's based on Cmongo, the spider Kaiju which made its debut in the best Godzilla movie, this one. It's a level 7 earth insect with 2400 attack and 2500 defense, he has the standard Kaiju effects, which I'll stop pointing out now since all the monsters have them, and for its own effect, when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field. Until the end of the next turn, that monster cannot attack and has its effects negated. Itsy bitsy son of a bitch can be used for pretty good disruption, especially considering that the effect is not once per turn, but there are better options to consider, mostly because the archetype has a somewhat better negation tool in its arsenal. Run it if you're still mad that spiders aren't a proper archetype. Taking a short detour into the spell lineup, we have the field spell Kyoto Waterfront, which has the following. Each time a card is sent from the field to the graveyard, place 1 Kaiju counter on this card for each card sent. Once per turn, while 3 or more Kaiju counters are on this card, you can add 1 Kaiju monster from your deck to your hand. If this card will be destroyed by a card effect, you can remove 1 Kaiju counter from this card instead. I mean, if you're playing a Kaiju-centric deck, it should be pretty apparent why you should max out on this one. Building up Kaiju counters is insanely easy as it simply happens while the duel is proceeding as normal, it doesn't waste counters to search, and it protects itself in a pinch. The other two cards that build up Kaiju counters are slow and unreliable, so Waterfront remains the most relevant option. Funny how a city most often made of cardboard in these movies is now printed on a piece of cardboard. That's what they call the circle of life.
The life cycle.
The first Kaiju monster from the second release pair is Radiant, the multi-dimensional Kaiju, based on... I couldn't tell you to save a life. Apparently his design takes inspiration from the Ultraman series, which I never had any exposure to. It's a level 7 fiend with 2800 attack and 2000 defense, and once per turn, you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, special summon 1 Radiant token, a dark fiend with 2800 attack and 0 defense, but it cannot be used as synchro material. Ah, it can't? And I was just gonna go on about how Radiant's token spawning ability would usher us into a new age of synchro domination. Jokes aside, it's the only Kaiju monster that provides additional field presence, which is pretty handy nowadays since you can use both Radiant and the token to go into a Link monster and do whatever you want from there. One of the cooler ways to use this effect is in the Crusadia Kaiju builds, boosting up your Equimax by 5600 attack, not counting the Kaiju on the opponent's field it's pointing to, which can make for some pretty fat damage output, but you're still mostly better off relying on Maximus for the OTKs. I think it's an underrated Kaiju due to the archetype's surprising lack of offensive capabilities, so I'd recommend a copy if you have space for it in the deck. A lot more noteworthy monster is Gameciel, the Sea Turtle Kaiju based on Gamera. Man, look at him go. Spins better than Nightmare Unicorn. It's a level 8 Aqua with 2200 attack and 3000 defense, and during either player's turn when your opponent activates a card or effect except Gameciel, the Sea Turtle Kaiju, you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, negate that activation, and if you do, banish that card. Gameciel was the face, heart and soul of the Kaiju archetype for an offensive amount of time, but not because of its amazing negate and banish effect, which is not even limited to a once per turn usage, but because it's the Kaiju monster with the lowest attack and therefore the easiest one to run over. Any and all boss monsters from late 2015 well up until the start of the Link era fell victim to a giant sea turtle being dropped square on their head without having a millisecond of available reaction time, which would soon be followed by the aforementioned turtle getting disposed of in the most anticlimactic ways that made you regret even bothering to put in the time to summon the now squashed boss monster. Again, all this pressure fell specifically onto Gameciel because it just so happened to have the lowest attack among the Kaijus. Weakness-induced practicality aside, Gameciel's actual effect is pretty busted. With enough counters on the field, you could probably cripple a whole bunch of your opponent's plays, and while the banish was probably put into the effect as a means of avoiding easy Kaiju counter generation, it inadvertently made the effect so much stronger. This archetype is just a whole smorgasbord of balancing mishaps, isn't it? Anyway, Gameciel is a cool turtle, play it but watch out if you're giving it to your opponent while Kaiju counters are on the field, cause playing Kaijus the way they were intended to is arguably the worst way to do it. Next up is Gadarla, the Mystery Dust Kaiju, which one would first imagine to be based on Matra, but the more monstrous appearance makes it a lot more similar to Batra. If anything, I gotta hand it to the TCG for not picking up the most predictable and obvious lineup of Kaijus out there. It's a level 8 wind insect with 2700 attack and 1600 defense, and once per turn during either player's turn, you can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field. The attack and defense of all other monsters in the field become halved. It's effectively a different flavor of Radiant, given that it's based on a bit of an unconventional damage dealing strategy, but the cost is kind of obnoxious and for some bizarre reason, it affects your own monsters as well. Pollen allergies? Maybe you can make room for it in those insect-oriented decks that got some funky support recently, but as I have nearly zero experience with them and didn't see anyone bring up Gadarla's relevance in the builds, I'll just leave it at that. Honestly, given the teaming, I'm surprised it's not simply Dogoran for back row. The other Kaiju from the third pair of monsters is Jizukiru, the star-destroying Kaiju. Kamongas, Jizukiru, what's next, Ejaculord? This was apparently loosely based on Legion monsters from the Gamera franchise, but I'm not seeing it. It's a level 10 light machine with 3300 attack and 2600 defense, and during either player's turn, when a card or effect is activated that targets exactly one card and no other cards, you can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, negate that effect, and if you do, you can destroy 1 card on the field. It's alright, I guess. Gameciel has a lower cost, its condition isn't nearly as specific, and it banishes a negation, while Jizzy Boy has higher stats, can destroy any card regardless of which one was negated, and due to not banishing, it builds up counters quickly. It's also a decent choice in that archetype based on rail track transport vehicles, although its name eludes me, and as a member of the archetype, its usage meanders between formats, but it's usually a pretty good choice. Thunder King, the Lightning Strike Kaiju. Is that really the best name you could have come up with? Is based on Godzilla's most popular nemesis, King Ghidorah, and it's a level 9 Thunder monster with 3300 attack and 2100 defense, and has the following effect. Once per turn, you can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field. Your opponent's cards and effects cannot be activated for the rest of this turn. Also, this card can make up to 3 attacks on monsters during each battle phase this turn. Beefy attack value, triple attacking on monsters, and as a thundering cherry on top, your opponent cannot do jack or shit this turn. It's all the destructiveness of Dogoran, but with more substantial damage output and a very admirable stun effect. Absolutely worth running as the definitive Kaiju boss. The final Kaiju monster is the mouthful Super Anti-Kaiju War Machine Mechadonger, featuring Dante from the Burning Abyss series. This one's clearly just based on Mechagodzilla, so thank you TCG for making this one easy for me. It's a level 8 light machine, and it's not a conventional Kaiju monster, as its attack is unknown, it cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned if the opponent controls a Kaiju, and of course you can only control 1 Kaiju monster. Once per turn you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, equip 1 Kaiju monster from your hand or graveyard to discard. This card gains attack equal to the combined original attack of the Kaiju monsters equipped by this effect. And that's it. He consumes kaijus and turns into a fat fuck that does absolutely nothing of value. A very relatable monster at least, but not a particularly playable one. Now that we reached the spell and trap lineup, we have the spell which solidified the status of the Kaiju engine as the be-all end-all of removal in this game, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Destroy as many monsters in the field as possible, then special summon in attack position 2 Kaiju monsters with different names from your deck, 1 on each side, but they cannot change their battle positions and must attack if able. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, add 1 Kaiju monster from your deck to your hand. You can only activate 1 Interrupted Kaiju Slumber per turn. It's a dark hole that gives you free monsters and searches more of them from the graveyard. It's limited for a reason. Look, it even tells you which ones to summon in the artwork. Furthermore, this card is a bit of a hot mess of rulings, mostly pertaining to the fact that you can activate it while you already control a Kaiju monster, which is a unique ruling override I cannot be asked to explain, so you just take my word for it. Slumber was an immensely controversial card due to being the centerpiece of the Kaiju engine, which found its way into absolutely every deck that had trouble with removal and could make room for it. Its reign of terror finally ended when it got limited halfway through 2017, but it's still an absolute must for any deck running more than 1 type of Kaiju. Don't let the sleeping Kaijus lie. Their only continuous spell, the Kaiju Files, has this effect. Each time a Kaiju monster is special summoned from the hand and or graveyard, place 1 Kaiju counter on this card, max 5. Once per turn you can target 1 Kaiju monster on the field, destroy that monster, then special summon 1 Kaiju monster with a different original name from your deck to its controller's field. You can send this card with 3 or more Kaiju counters to the graveyard, add 1 Kaiju spell or trap card from your deck to your hand except the Kaiju Files. It's okay, I guess. Swapping between Kaijus while building up counters on Waterfront is a nice little bit of synergy, while having a counter generation effect by itself in case your Gameciel wasn't negating hard enough. The effect to search Kaiju back row wasn't that impressive, but anything that lets you fetch Slumber faster is decent in my book. Run by preference. And the last Kaiju card is their only continuous trap, Kaiju Capture Mission. Once per turn, if there are less than 3 Kaiju counters on this card, you can target 1 Kaiju monster on the field, change it to face down defense position, then place 1 Kaiju counter on this card, max 3. If this card in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, you can draw 2 cards. You can only use this effect of Kaiju Capture Mission once per turn. Much like Files, people don't tend to run this one, but I'm personally a fan due to its funky effects. Flipping a Kaiju face down lets you take advantage of your Kaiju's high defense or the opponent's low defense monster, can be activated any number of times per turn as long as there are less than 3 counters on the card, and the face down Kaiju is treated as not being on the field, so you can flip your own to summon a different one. The floating effect is a bit specific, given that we're way past the days of MSD bait, but it can make for decent recovery in a pinch. Again, run by preference. As for the grading scale, there's kinda not much I can do here. Kaijus are hardly a standard deck when it comes to basic rating outlines, given that you're not really supposed to run them as a pure build, and the entirety of the grading process would be spent on evaluating their worth as an engine. In that case, the versatility of said engine used to be very admirable, but with Interrupted Kaiju Slumber at 1, you hardly ever see people running them anymore. However, you can do a lot of cool stuff with different Kaiju variants, of which the following are the most relevant. Gradle Kaiju. Gradles are sticky little boys with no concern for messing with other people's property, which gives them great synergy with Kaijus as they tend to spend a lot of time on your opponent's side of the field. Relinquished Kaiju. Pretty self-explanatory, focuses on giving your opponent fat beaters and sucking them back in with Relinquished or Millennium Eyes. The usual Predaplant engine is there for searching the fusion spell, and Kinkabyo is able to recycle the Absorbi boys. Finally, this hot mess is something you could remotely remotely describe as a pure Kaiju build, given that it mostly relies on the synergy between their cards, alongside Malefic Stardust and this thing I can't pronounce, to make the rank 8s which the extra deck is full of. The mark Kaijus left on Yu-Gi-Oh! As a symbol of power creep can hardly be ignored, but it's not exactly simple to describe. On one hand, the Kaiju engine provided a mechanic for effortless disposal of any nasty monsters that crippled your plays, and given how easy it had become to put such monsters onto the field, Kaijus definitely were a necessary evil. But on the other hand, it was already a shitty situation for the game to have even gotten to the point where Kaijus are simply accepted as something that, quote-unquote, has to exist. What started off as a cool idea to implement a popular sci-fi combat genre into an archetypal gameplay mechanic spiraled into one of the most infamous removal engines in the game's history, refusing to drop out of relevance until Slumber finally got hit. Now Kaijus just stick around as a pet deck and a surprise for random people during online matches, as their great Magnus they spent their entire hand on to summon disappears under an angry turtle.
Whoosh, 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 yeah! Let me just take your cards, Steven! Yeah! Steven! Let me just take your cards for a minute. Yeah! Let me just take your cards for a minute. Oh, that was embarrassing. Oh, what's this? Whoosh! Steven! Yeah! Let me just take your cards for a minute. Steven! Yeah! Whoosh! Here it comes! Ow! Whoosh! Whoosh! Oh, that was embarrassing. Oh, what's this? Whoosh! Here comes Steven! Here it comes! Yeah! Whoosh! Whoosh! Oh, that was embarrassing. Oh, what's this? Whoosh! Here comes Steven! Here it comes! Ow! Here it comes! Ow! Whoosh! Whoosh! Oh, that was embarrassing. Oh, what's this? Whoosh! Here comes Steven! Yeah! Yeah! I kind of just want to know, where did you net deck this from? Now, I know Ojamaline, he doesn't have any space to be critical, and it's your right to think that, and it's your right to say that. But at the same time, I mean, come on, you didn't make this deck.
Hi there everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Archetype Archive. There's not much I can say here that I haven't already said in the update video, so I'll just mention you can download the Ojama Lime texture and sound pack for Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro in the description, although God knows why you would want to do that. Blah blah Patreon, Discord, my name's Rata, and I'll see you next time.